range of the harmonica. They make them in all these different keys. The highest standard key harmonica is F. I mean, wow, you know, that'll scare the cockroaches out of the walls, you know? And so it's a whole different sound, playing in A minor on an F harp. And then I have a low F. It's tuned an octave lower. So that's a whole different sound. But also the lower reed, the lower harmonicas, lower key harmonicas, the reeds respond a little slower because the way they tune these things, I'm simplifying it a little bit, is they basically are all about the same size. They're all the same size reeds for the lower harmonicas, but they leave different amounts of metal on the tip. So if you want to have a harmonica sound lower, you leave more of the original metal on the tip of the reed, and it slows it down, so it can't vibrate as quickly. And it also makes it harder to play like really fast and forcefully on lower key harmonicas. You have to really develop a lot of technique to play really fast and loud on a low key harmonica. So if there's some sort of real fast bluegrass tune, if I have a choice of playing it on a high F harp or a low F harp, I'll probably pick the high F. But if it's a jazz ballad, I'll pick the low F harp. So it's kind of a complicated question because it involves a lot of different factors. Who I'm playing with, how fast the tune is, you know, how many different keys the tune might go into. You know. Any other questions? Yeah.
How did you guys start playing together?
Oh, well, Chris was recommended by a friend of mine, bass player in Chicago, and he came over to the house, and the very first time we played together at my house sounded so great that I wanted to start a band with him in it. We started this one. It's called Acoustic Express, and we started to, I wanted to have a band where everything was acoustic, because one of the problems with this instrument is that it gets drowned out easily, and you have to amplify yourself in almost every single situation. But I was just tired of playing amplified, and I thought, why don't I have a band where I can just hear myself? And so we had 2 acoustic guitars and an upright bass, and we actually played certain gigs totally unamplified. And 2 of the tracks on the CD are recorded like that, just with one stereo mic in front of us in this cafe. And it's a great sound. It's more of like real music, instead of having to always play through a PA or through an amp. You know. But that's, why don't we play one of the tunes from that CD? Why don't we play Giovanni? This is a little bit of Macedonian blues, and I brought the Dumbek along with me. This is a drum that's played all over the Eastern Europe and the Middle East and North Africa. It's this one's from Turkey. Player, if you're a singer or whatever it might be, just having to create rhythms is a very, very important thing. And so I can do that on the harmonica too. You notice I do tap my feet a bunch, with the main rhythmic thing. Because the harmonica doesn't really directly involve your feet or your hands, which are the main things that are used for rhythm. So sometimes you need to reinforce it. When I teach harmonica and I teach beginning harmonica students playing a blues shuffle, I encourage them to tap their feet. Sometimes just tap your left foot. Sometimes tap your right foot. Sometimes tap alternating. It's like walking. And it's also a great instrument to play while you're walking. You just naturally get into a groove walking. It's harder to get into a 7/8 groove when you're walking, unless one of your legs is shorter. Any questions? I'm kind of tired of talking.
Ask you kind of a different type of question, which is that just personally, take a couple of musicians who, one, you just really enjoy, and then 2, someone who you just really respect. Whether it's Charlie Parker, I mean, not harmonica.
Oh, okay, non-harmonica. Yeah.
Ears,
Well, my favorite my favorite musicians of all time, probably Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, Brahms, Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, Herbie Hancock. That's a bunch right there. And all sorts of Bulgarian musicians too. I'm huge fans of that music. And the great Indian sitarist Nikhil Banerjee, who I thought was the best musician I ever heard live. And the tabla player Zakir Hussain is another one who's amazing. I've also been fortunate to play with a lot of great musicians and record with a lot of great musicians. With a combination of playing piano and harmonica, I've gotten into just about every style of music. So the harmonica, it's let me play with people like Dolly Parton and Alison Krauss and people like that. And the piano, I used to play with Paquito de Rivera, I played with Tito Puente, all sorts of people like that. So and sometimes I'll play both instruments in certain groups and sometimes simultaneously. So I'm kind of one and a half guys at times. Not like the TV show.
Could you give us just a little glimpse of the process of playing with Bela and the Wootens and how much rehearsal you guys, especially when you got back with them, and how much of it do you all have to work out and how much of it is improvisation? Just that whole amazing process.
Well, any group that improvises, there's always some things that are composed and some things that are improvised. And sometimes it's hard for people on the outside of it to know which one of those things is which. I remember when I started listening to jazz, it was like a puzzle for me. What's the structure of this tune? What is set? What's improvised? And I started reading the liner notes on these old Blue Note jazz albums, and sometimes they were very helpful. They talked about how many bars long the form was, if the bass line was set, if there was a certain kind of horn figure that was being played. It's kind of a puzzle. So with any band, there's these things. So with the Flecktones, I used to be in the band from '89 through '92, and played with them a few times over the years, and then we had a big reunion tour 2010 through 2011, or no, 2011 and 12, I guess it was. We played about 140 concerts. We recorded a CD, and Bela and I got together and wrote some stuff, and Bela and Victor and Roy, we wrote some things together, and we rehearsed a few times, and then we went into the studio, and we really ironed out the music in the studio, because we didn't really know how the music went. We sort of knew how it went, but there are some tunes that we realized as we were recording them, we don't really have an ending for this one, do we? We better write an ending right now. And one of them, the one that was most that I'm thinking about was the one I actually won a Grammy for co-writing. I had to write the ending right as we were recording it, right before we started recording it, because we had practiced it. So I had to make up an ending and then teach it to the other guys. And in a band like that, sometimes I'll write stuff out, sometimes it's by ear, sometimes a combination. Certain guys like learning things by ear more, except if it was too hard to just learn the whole thing by ear, they would write down a little shorthand. Victor would write shorthand charts out for himself. The drummer, Future Man, he would usually not like to look at a chart at all, just memorize things. Bela would write things out in banjo tab, because he reads that much better than he reads music. And some things he would write out, some things he would just memorize. I like to have a chart. I wrote out pretty detailed charts of most of the music, except for certain tunes that were real simple, I just learned by ear. But most of the stuff was pretty complicated, and it really helps me, especially if I'm playing piano. Because you can't fake chords, on piano, you have to really know what you're doing. So, yeah, it took about 3 weeks to record, and it was kind of, like I said, hammered it out in the studio, and it was a process where we kind of doing everything at the same time, learning the music, figuring out how to solo over certain parts of it, figuring out what our parts should really be, revising things, writing endings. because we hadn't toured in years together. Also, these days, when a band is going on tour, they're going to put out a CD. A lot of times, you don't want to practice the stuff on stage because people are there with their cameras and your music ends up on YouTube, and then who wants to buy it? It's a really weird thing. It's exactly the opposite of the way it was when I was growing up.
Can we get the details one more time, because they're going to have to go to their next block?
Oh.
The performance tonight, please.
Oh, yeah. Here.
And then also,